On a snowy January night in 1796, a royal heir entered the world at Carlton House in London. Princess Charlotte Augusta of Wales was born on 7th January 1796 to George, Prince of Wales, the future George IV, and his wife Caroline of Brunswick, immediately becoming George III's only legitimate grandchild and heir presumptive. The old king rejoiced at his granddaughter's arrival. As he wrote, he always wished it should be of that sex, hoping her birth might bind the warring Prince and Princess of Wales together. In Charlotte's first hours, the court buzzed with hope, but her birth also cast a shadow over her parents. George and Caroline's marriage was already doomed, and within months they unofficially separated. The baby princess was placed under her father's guardianship, with George III's oversight, and Queen Charlotte swiftly assumed charge of Charlotte's care. From the cradle, Charlotte was surrounded by governesses and servants chosen by the Queen and Prince, as the Prince Regent deferred to his mother's wishes. "Your choice and your opinion will ever guide mine," he wrote in 1796. Charlotte's upbringing was carefully ordered but often lonely. She moved from home to home, Carlton House, Shrewsbury House, Windsor, with her own modest household and staff. Although she had no playmates of her own class, the quiet of her chambers was punctuated by lessons. As befitting a future queen, her education was rigorous. She studied history, French, Latin, and even politics under royal tutors, and enjoyed dancing, music, and horseback riding. But as she grew, Charlotte's spirited personality emerged. Biographers note that even as a child, she had a warm heart and a happy recklessness in her manner. She was bright and curious. In 1811, she even requested a copy of her father's speech on Regency laws because "it is a subject very interesting, particularly to me." Yet she was not naturally studious, with messy handwriting and little patience for tedious exercises. Her governess, Lady de Clifford, observed that Charlotte had become an exuberant tomboy who insisted on swinging her wild, sandy hair loose and letting her ankles show under her dresses. Charlotte excelled in what she loved. She became an accomplished pianist and horsewoman, and compiled a scrapbook of favourite poems by Milton and Pope, as well as patriotic verses by Lord Erskine. Charlotte's relationships with her family were complex. She was the darling of her grandparents, especially Queen Charlotte, who reportedly praised the baby as having an uncommon share of good sense. King George III doted on Charlotte as the hope of the dynasty, but her parents were a source of pain. Caroline of Brunswick, though tempestuous and often scandalized, lavished affection on Charlotte as her only daughter. Yet Caroline's life was full of turmoil. Rumours even swirled of a child born out of wedlock, leading Charlotte to remark in later years, "My mother was wicked, but she would not have turned so wicked had not my father been much more wicked still." George, the Prince Regent, was outwardly disinterested and often hostile. When Charlotte was 8, he seized the family's living quarters at Carlton House and moved her to Warwick House with a staff where she lived in a household of her own, in the company of no one who was not paid to be there. In those years, Charlotte became close to female relatives like her aunts and friends like Mercer Elphinston, but always longed for a mother's embrace. Even in childhood, Charlotte sensed her parents' animosity. Her father's libertine reputation, once condemned by his father George III as beset by unruly passions, made him jealous of how the public adored Charlotte. As a teen, Charlotte provided a sharp contrast to the decadent Prince Regent and his mad father. Cheering crowds met her wherever she went. This bred resentment in George, who, upon becoming Prince Regent in 1811, imposed strict controls on his daughter. He cut her allowances, kept her away from court, and sent her to live with maiden aunts at Windsor out of sight. Charles Greville and other courtiers noted how Charlotte chafed under this regimen. She answered back even to her stern governess Lady de Clifford, once quipping after a spat, "We had a few sour grapes between us, but before we had finished our contest, I made her swallow them all." Meanwhile, Charlotte's mother was all but banished. Caroline's visits were restricted to quick consolations, but by 1798 even those ceased. In 1704, George III began taking a greater personal interest in Charlotte's education, appointing Lady de Clifford as governess and providing a broad curriculum. Yet Charlotte never forgot Caroline. They remained affectionate in secret, even as Caroline was kept abroad. Young Charlotte grew intensely loyal to her absent mother and began to defy her father. As Charlotte entered her teenage years, she became infamous for her headstrong spirit. She often threw tantrums or ran off if thwarted, behaviour noted with both concern and amusement by her attendants. She refused to conform to stiff court manners, once letting her undergarments show beneath her gown in deliberate rebellion. Like Austen's heroine Marianne Dashwood, Charlotte knew her own mind and spoke it freely. She would rather clean her riding boots or write a patriotic poem than sit patiently in a drawing room. This vivacity made her immensely popular with the people of Britain, even as it exasperated her father. In private, Charlotte told her friends she hated the spinster life that Regency politics had forced upon her. Above all, she yearned for independence. The only way to escape was to marry on her own terms. By 1813, Charlotte was at the centre of a tangled web of suitors, gossip, and political intrigue. Romantic whispers linked her to several young men, some entirely unsuitable by court standards. Among these was the dashing Prince Augustus of Prussia, a charming but impoverished German prince with whom Charlotte reportedly shared a flirtation. It was rumoured that they exchanged clandestine notes and even planned an elopement, though no solid evidence survives to confirm the scandalous story. Another speculative match involved Lord Charles Fitzroy, an equerry in her household, and a figure of some romantic notoriety. His easy manner and good looks earned Charlotte's favour, though this too was swiftly quashed when the Prince Regent discovered the rumours. The idea of his daughter marrying a man without a royal title was unthinkable. Perhaps the most unusual and telling aspect of these entanglements was Charlotte's supposed attachment to Captain Hesse, an officer in the British Army and a relative of the House of Hesse. Reports of their interactions at court balls and private suppers sparked considerable gossip. Charlotte's fondness for military men was well known. She once claimed she would sooner marry a soldier in a red coat than a foreign prince she'd never met. Then came the fateful proposal of 1813. The Prince Regent arranged an engagement between Charlotte and William, hereditary Prince of Orange, the future King of the Netherlands. William was young and handsome. Indeed, courtiers noted he was informed and pleasant, the best waltzer that ever was. And the match made political sense as Britain and the Netherlands were allied against Napoleon. At first, the idea appealed even to Charlotte, since it offered an escape from her father's control. But when Charlotte met William in August 1813, her enthusiasm vanished. It was reported that he arrived drunk at their introduction. More importantly, Charlotte balked at leaving England. She told her circle that a future British queen should not marry a foreigner, and that she could never live permanently in Holland. The young princess found herself siding with popular sentiment that regarded her marriage as a matter of national as well as personal consequence. By June 1814, Charlotte took the bold step of breaking the engagement. "No arguments, no threats," she defiantly announced, "shall ever bend me to marry this detested Dutchman." Prince George was furious. In a fit of pique, he dismissed all of Charlotte's servants and confined her to Cranbourne Lodge in Windsor Forest, cut off from society and even forbidden visits from her mother. Caroline of Brunswick left the country soon after and never saw Charlotte again, a loss that deeply distressed the young princess. For a time, Charlotte lived in virtual house arrest, maintained only by the Queen's concern and her own proud silence. Yet, public sympathy surged. By August 1814, the Prince Regent relented and allowed Charlotte a trip to Weymouth with her governess. Word of her arrival ignited the crowds. At every stop along the coast, townsfolk turned out to cheer and weep for the popular princess. When she arrived, the celebrations were extraordinary. The seaside was lit with firecrackers, and a giant arrangement reading "Hail, Princess Charlotte, Europe's hope and Britain's glory" glowed on the beach. The sense that Charlotte embodied the future of the monarchy had become a near religious fervour among the people. It was amidst this maelstrom of hope that Charlotte found love. In the summer of 1814, a dashing European prince arrived in London. Prince Leopold of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld was 5 years Charlotte's senior, a veteran of the Napoleonic Wars and a gentleman of quiet charm. Fate arranged an introduction in August 1814, some say at a hotel reception Charlotte had engineered, and the chemistry was immediate. The princess decided she had found the husband of her choice. Soon she made her feelings clear to relatives. Charlotte declared her favour for Leopold when others proposed lesser matches. Leopold himself was smitten. After returning to England in 1816, having first waited abroad for political tides to turn, he was invited to dine with the Prince Regent and Charlotte on 26 February 1816. It was a memorable evening. Charlotte wrote to her friend Mercer that evening, "I find him quite charming, and I go to bed happier than I have ever done yet in my life." The Prince Regent could not help but smile. The dowdy Coburg prince, though low-born in British eyes, had every quality that seemed to please his headstrong daughter. The royal wedding became a moment of national euphoria. On the 2nd of May, 1816, a balmy spring night at Carlton House, Charlotte and Leopold were married amid splendour. The public streamed to witness the first British royal wedding in over 2 decades, and balconies hung with silk. The bride wore a stunning gown of cloth of silver with a transparent overdress embroidered in silver lame, bedecked with diamonds. The dress alone cost £10,000. It was said that when Leopold, in professing to endow her with all his worldly goods, could only offer a simple promise, Charlotte quietly giggled at the modesty of the pledge, a moment of levity in an otherwise reverent ceremony. Both were visibly delighted. Charlotte later called Leopold the perfection of a lover, and he admitted that they were, as he phrased it, constantly inseparable, except when I went out to shoot. After so many battles over Charlotte's life, the wedding sealed a true union of hearts, ending the isolation of her recent years. With the wedding came tranquility. The government purchased Claremont House in Surrey as a home for the couple. At last, the 20-year-old Charlotte had a nest of her own. At Claremont, the young princess thrived. She revelled in the gardens, organising walks and aspiring to build a tea-house among the flowers. "We lead a very quiet and retired life here," she wrote to a friend in December 1816, "but a very, very happy one." The villagers of nearby Esher adored their new royal neighbours. Charlotte and Leopold made themselves accessible, hiring dozens of locals to restore the estate, even giving the unemployed a chance to sweep the walks or tend the gardens. Neighbours later recalled the royal couple as kind and charming hosts. From the outside, it seemed like a fairy tale interlude. The shy German prince and the spirited English princess were living a calm, contented life, far from the jealous prying of the Prince Regent's court. But a dark shadow was on the horizon. In early 1817, Charlotte became pregnant, and the whole country waited anxiously for news of the future king. On the 3rd of November, her labour began under the care of her physicians, notably Sir Richard Croft, a fashionable London accoucheur. Croft admitted to colleagues that the delivery was proving dangerously slow, and he considered using forceps to expedite what was now a very overdue birth. In the end, he refrained, hoping nature would prevail. Finally, at 9 p.m. on Wednesday, the 5th of November, 1817, after more than 40 hours of agony, Princess Charlotte gave birth. But it was a stillborn son. The doctors worked desperately to revive the infant, but he was gone. Their triumph at a live baby was dashed by immediate heartbreak. Within hours, tragedy compounded. Charlotte initially seemed relieved that her child had been born, if sorrowfully deceased. But by midnight, she began to have fits of vomiting and faintness. Over the next few hours, she grew steadily worse. Her skin turned cold, her breathing laboured, and she complained of strange ringing in her ears. By 2:27 a.m. on Thursday, the 6th of November, Princess Charlotte, only 21 years old, slipped into eternal unconsciousness. She died at 2:30 a.m. on the 6th of November, 1817. The news hit the nation like a bullet. Scenes of public grief are recorded across Britain. Princess Dorothea of Leven, wife of the Russian ambassador, wrote that in the streets, people of every class were found in tears, that churches were full at all hours, and shops were shuttered for days. The royal family was shattered. Prince Leopold, devastated, hardly knew how to mourn. Queen Caroline of Brunswick, who had lived abroad since 1814, reportedly fainted on hearing the news. Even Queen Charlotte herself was grief-stricken. In a letter to the Prince Regent, she wrote, "How painful it is for me to take up my pen at this moment when I had flattered myself to make use of it by giving you joy, which it has pleased the Almighty to turn to grief, a mourning for us all." The Prince Regent was too anguished to attend his daughter's funeral. On the 19th of November 1817, Charlotte was laid to rest in St. George's Chapel, Windsor, alongside her infant son. By all accounts, virtually the entire nation wept. Public buildings were draped in black, theatres and taverns closed in respect, and street after street was lined with mourning crowds. A subscription was raised to fund a monument at her tomb, a symbolic testament that even in death Charlotte remained beloved by her people. Charlotte's untimely death did more than break hearts. It threw the British succession into crisis. She had been George III's only legitimate grandchild, and with her gone, the future of the throne suddenly lay in doubt. The king's other sons were mostly old and unmarried, and panic gripped the court. In the aftermath, the Duke of Clarence, later William IV, the Duke of Kent, and the Duke of Cambridge all hastily renounced their mistresses and sought royal brides. Almost overnight, Europe watched the royal marriage race unfold. These marriages bore fruit. Notably, Edward, Duke of Kent, Charlotte's uncle, married Victoria of Saxe-Coburg, and in 1819 fathered a daughter, also named Victoria. That child, George III's great-granddaughter, would become Queen Victoria in 1837. In this way, the death of the young Princess Charlotte indirectly paved the way for the next era of the monarchy. Princess Charlotte never ruled, but in her brief life she became the Regency era's beloved people's princess. She was mourned as a fallen hope and remembered as a figure of promise. Statues and memorials were erected. Most poignantly, the sculptor Matthew Coates Wyatt carved her funeral monument out of marble, funded by thousands of humble subscriptions from common Britons. Had she lived, Charlotte would have succeeded George III and George IV on the throne, a queen crowned in light. Her story remains a haunting what-if in history, a vivid life of hope and independence cut short by tragedy.